Wednesday by being brutally honest, right? Yesterday morning, I woke up with my uterus trying to sabotage me again, and I had to cancel a plan with a friend, the very same friend who's here to support me in such a lovely manner. And moreover, this reminded me of when I first joined my new workplace. I work at a space engineering company called Craft Prospect, and I woke up one morning, barely 2 weeks after I had joined, like my insights were trying to get outside, which fair enough, they were. So I called up my boss and I went, I'm not feeling so well today, can I work from home? And he's a lovely boss, so he wanted to make sure I was okay, and he asked me, everything okay, what's up? And I was like, I have cramps, and and then he said, yeah, just fill in the absence process online, and we are a startup, so every new process needs a guinea pig, and I was a guinea pig, and I had the opportunity to inaugurate the absence process where, under the details of what was wrong, why I'm working from home, I wrote period cramps. And then I felt very funny at the same time, a bit embarrassed at the same time, and also I was thinking that it is a good thing that, I have inaugurated this in such a manner by normalizing it in the workplace, right? And this tells us how much all of us still feel weird about talking about a procedure which is probably the oldest and most useful tradition of the entire primate existence. This is literally the reason why civilization continues to spin around its axis, right? Anyway, as part of my introduction, let me start with what I do and what I am. So I'm a polymath. It's the first time I've said it out loud. It always felt really weird for me to say, because what do we think when we think of the word polymath, right? Da Vinci comes to mind. Maybe if you're Indian, Rabindranath Tagore comes to mind. And sometimes one of the very few women who always find their place in this hallowed hall is Marie Curie. But most of the time when I say it, it feels embarrassingly like begging for legitimacy for my gender. And I thought, well, isn't that the story in everything? Apart from hearing the stories of how most of our inventors, writers, mathematicians often use their wives' partners for most of the work they did while taking the credit for it, I also started thinking about unpaid labor. Right? I was having a conversation with someone on Facebook and I asked for constructive feedback, and he said, well, I could give you, but I'm not going to be paid for it. So, and then that stuck me. That's a very entitled position to come from, right? I mean, most of us do unpaid labor because of the widely accepted myth that women are good at multitasking. This is often used to legitimize pushing unpaid labor on women. And most of this also goes unacknowledged, right? Yeah, can I get the... So right, who am I? I'm a very rational person. Well, not pseudo-rational like Jordan Peterson. I'm a rational person with an extremely high pain tolerance who woke up yesterday with her uterus trying to sabotage me. I talked about that. So I have actively tried to improve my privilege level in life because that, gets you some stuff and makes a difference between survival and death and opportunities. Right, and now I'm talking about unpaid labor. So, and anything which is not acknowledged, which is unpaid, is not worthy of greatness, right? So, anyone who does unpaid labor cannot be a polymath. Any woman who doesn't know her own worth cannot be a polymath. Any woman who does not have access to visibility cannot be a polymath. Any woman who is objectified, like Vicky was talking about our statues, cannot be a polymath. This is taking power out of her hands. And because being a polymath requires agency and aggressiveness, qualities often admired in men and if not downright violently unaccepted, grudgingly and uncomfortably ignored in most women. In order to be a polymath, women have to be confident in their excellence in these multiple fields and actively claim credit in all of these fields. And as someone pointed out to me yesterday, women who have managed to go to a higher position in one of the fields often have to give up multiple things in their lives because they have to hold themselves to a much higher standard than their counterparts, right? If they are seen dividing their times between multiple things, be it family, careers, different stuff, it decreases legitimacy to their claim again, and so they get less money, less credit, and less students if they're researchers, and so on. Moreover, most women I know hold themselves to a much more rigid and higher standard, like Camilla was saying, than most men I meet. We hold ourselves to a much more higher and rigid standard. And in my profession, which is one of the most gender-skewed professions in the world, I meet a lot of men. And recently, I have started getting surprised at how easily they produce work which is derivative and applaud themselves for it. And no, I'm not saying this in the sense that it is bad. It is absolutely not bad. My intent is to point out the difference. As a simple example, let me talk about fiction. So I spent a holiday with a bunch of friends, most of them men, and one of the exercises we did were we had some prompts and we wanted to write some stories, right? So I took 2 days to cut out page after page after page of what I thought, this thing reminds me of that thing I had read some other time. This thing reminds me of that thing I had read some other time. But then I got surprised when everyone read out their work, and I found that most of the work was derivative, but it was written casually. It was fine to be derivative, right? While for me, it wasn't. And these works are considered to be acceptably original, while most women would judge themselves harshly. And this on a mass scale reduces the overall polymathy visibility of women. Moreover, asking something for yourself is considered selfish, at least in a lot of Indian families, because I'm Indian. Even kids, little 6-year-old girls, are taught to forego their share of things for their brothers. Traditional pujas and ceremonies demand women not to eat before doing certain things, to fast for the longevity of their spouses. Without thinking of their own, which I think is a gross misrepresentation of what actually happened in that holy story. But anyways, and so asking credit for artwork or writing seems almost frivolous in comparison. And I think that most women do not have the privilege of frivolity. And this is very important. Right. Now, I almost found it hilarious that we find a 6-year-old man who does not know how to cook, normal, yet polymathy, yet a 6-year-old who knows how to do laundry, clean her room, do her homework, and perfectly make dinner, nothing special. In fact, allow me to point out that women are trained to be polymaths all of their lives. And in following this line of thought, I discovered the original polymaths. Anyone who has caring and unpaid responsibilities, which consists of homemakers and housewives to a large extent. And this is very important, right? Because women's unpaid work subsidizes the cost of care that sustains families, supports economies, and often fills in for the lack of social services. It has been seen that women's unpaid labor is worth $10.9 trillion globally. And this includes work such as cooking, cleaning, care work, agriculture, and doesn't even start to include the creative work that women do for their sons, daughters, husbands, and so on. Second reason why the world, in this case the global economy, is spinning around its axis. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be loud and say I'm a polymath. Now I'm going to go into what I actually do, right? So I did my PhD in quantum gravity, where I was studying black holes revolving around each other, producing ripples in space-time, which are known as gravitational waves. I studied a lot of gravity, and I tried to see how it curves our space-time and how it affects what the sun, the earth, the moon do in our daily lives. And currently, how do I play this one? Yeah, hopefully it doesn't have sound. We don't need the sound. Can you?
What is a CubeSat?
Yeah.
CubeSats.
Yeah. So basically, now I'm working as a joint position between this space startup called Craft Prospect and University of Strathclyde as a space quantum technologies developer, where we work with tiny little satellites. So we take CubeSats, and I'm in charge of the quantum aspect of things. I take a lot of quantum experiments, put them on satellites, and we send them into space, and we do a lot of experiments in space. And at the same time, apart from that, I have founded a queer feminist digital international magazine called Carved Voices. And the second issue, Camilla's work, also got featured. I have women being to thank for making me meet amazing women who just blow my mind every time I meet them. So come talk to me about it. Me and my co-founder, who is one of the youngest civil judges in India with a criminal law background, we founded this magazine in 2016. And they were supposed to be here, but Somehow we didn't get them delivered, so hopefully they will be here over the time of the conference, and you can buy a few copies if you need, but they're also online, and you can go to cardvoices.com. Apart from that, I'm a gender strategy consultant to Some Strategy in Canada and a few other organizations, building upon my experience and the work I did as part of my PhD when I was working for Athena Swan in the UK. For some of you who don't know what Athena Swan is, it looks at equality and diversity on university campuses and how, if people are equally represented, what are the roadblocks coming into it, and so on. And at the same time, I really like talking about what I do and figuring out how everything is interconnected. So I write a lot of, so I'm a science writer, and a lot of my work has been published here and there in various magazines, and I keep blogging on what I write. So I was like, love and gravity, because both are attractive, right? But anyways, in the spirit of being brutally honest again, let me talk about who I was once upon a time. I was a little misogynist, to be honest. Most of the world is still stuck there, and most of us were little misogynists, right? Once upon a time. I remember some stuff that I did quite sharply and quite harshly for myself, I judge. But it's good to judge yourselves about these things, I think. So my mother works for the state government. Do you realize how we all talk about our mothers? It's amazing, right? So my mother works in the state government in Orissa, which is a state in India. And it was a big building, and she was one of the few women during that time working there. And the building did not have a women's toilet. Can you believe it? So my mother, like any reasonable woman, went ahead and asked for one, right? She did the process, tried to do it. Now, what followed was mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling to me now, but not then. She was harassed, laughed at, and tagged a toilet lady, right? Everyone laughed at her. And this followed her home because a lot of my friends, families, my dad, everyone worked in the same environment and people knew each other. So when I, as a 5-6-year-old, heard this, the little misogynist, completely desperate at protecting my mother, I mean me, a little one, trying to protect a grown woman, I mean the cheek, but I said to her, do you really need a toilet? Why give people a reason to say these things? I mean, just give it up for the sake of peace, right? And when I grew up, and I can't for the life of me work or go anywhere which does not have an utterly clean toilet within perfect reach now, I feel utterly gobsmacked at how normal it is we have made to even enable a 5-year-old to ask women to give up their basic rights, right? How normal we have made to ask women to put themselves in a position to contract UTIs and not have a place to change their sanitary products or just to pee. How many 5-year-olds tell their mom to give up fighting against domestic violence? I'm sure many, many, many. How many 5-year-olds ask their mothers and their aunts and their sisters to not be crazy and follow their dreams because of that they're having a lot of problems at home, so they must give it up. It must be that easy, right? And this infantilization continues in every aspect of life. Protection by men and by little brothers, enabling the infantilization of grown women who are their wives and mothers and are the people making the world spin around its axis, as I said. But they must keep quiet and follow their lead because they are the men of the house. And saying all this now, I feel a bit vulnerable to know that this is being recorded and my friends and family will see it, but I also want them to see it. But I feel vulnerable because saying out loud that grown women deserve respect feels like blasphemy, right? Because let's be honest, it is. I feel like my life would have been slightly different if I had a brother, but I'm gonna talk about that later. So the thing is, if a little brother would have told me that, one of my cousins once said, he grew up and he said, I will bring the luggage in. This is a man's work. And I just felt utterly disrespected because I, for the last 8 years of my life, live alone. And so, with living alone comes all the responsibilities of doing everything that life demands. And so I do all these things on a daily basis. And this brings myself to my next point. A room of one's own, right? Why is living by yourself important for a woman? Womaning in this world takes away meaning quite often. It hides who you are. Our lives are curated. What did we do? Who did we look at? What did we eat? How does our bodies look? Did we make ourselves thinner? Did we make ourselves fatter? Do we have body hair? Did we sit in a ladylike way? What did we talk about with our friends? In certain Indian households, I just remember this today, a woman sitting and doing nothing means laziness. And we have there's something very common that people say, "Arey बैठी क्यों है? उठ के कुछ काम तो कर," which means why are you sitting? You don't have any work, or something like that, So, but make no mistake, I'm talking about India because I come from India, but there is an equivalence of this everywhere we go to. Somewhere it's less, somewhere it's more. But if you don't sit doing nothing, how would you think? If you do not think, how would you realize what's happening to you? Who you are? What is your real voice? If you don't sit doing nothing, how would you appreciate the beauty of nature? How would you see yourselves in the shoes of flaneurs and philosophers who went around the world doing precisely nothing in order to produce derivative work about the meaning of life? Living with other people automatically associates shame with our existence because we are automatically performing for the male gaze, right? As Chidamanda Ngozi once said, we teach girls shame. Close your legs, cover yourself. We make them feel as though being born female, they're already guilty of something. And so girls grow up to be women who can't say they have desire. They grow up to be women who silence themselves. They grow up to be women who can't say what they truly think. And they grow up, and this is the worst thing we do to girls. They grow up to be women who have turned pretense into an art form. And so this brings me my future plans, to drop the art of pretense as art, and to maybe do some stand-up and utterly embarrass myself. Because embarrassing myself is a good way of, getting over blocks that we have, right? So I realized that I learned to dream when I was still at home, but with my parents, but I started actually doing these things when I moved out. I allowed myself to do things when I had time, privilege, space, and privacy. Okay, now, once upon a time, there were not that many women in high schools, right? The rhetoric was that women are not meant for education. I mean, forget about the fact that computer was invented by Ada Lovelace and the first human computers were female. Anything which becomes important automatically got the reputation of masculinity. Researchers started looking at are women's brains different, and always came up with a logic to explain why women couldn't do education, why they couldn't do maths. And then women started outperforming men in high school, right? So the question naturally became, fine, women can do high school, but high school is easy. Why are women not progressing to higher education? But then women started flooding undergrad. All over the world, statistics has improved today, and in the UK, women make up 40% of maths and physics undergrad. And now the question becomes, surely, undergrad is not that hard, but women do not have motivation to go on to even higher positions. Women are not good at decision making. Women are not good at leadership positions, at strategy. That brings me to all the strategizing that women do most of the time to avoid assault, to avoid what people are commenting on what they're wearing every day. Wake up in the morning and think about the perfect outfit to wear. How do you take your son to school and then go to work on the right time, and then make sure what you say so that you come across as confident, but not overconfident and not bossy, and all these different things. And so people say that women can't do family and careers together, which implies they can't multitask, so we come a full circle where people are contradicting themselves. Opposed to popular opinions about women's ability to do hard work, one study in India showed that the only place where women are equal to men are at the position of contractual labor. So the question is not why women can't perform. The question is that why is the metric skewed? What stops them performing to their full potential, and why are they not angrier? These are the questions that we should look at. What is keeping women back? What extra challenges do they face on a daily basis? How is this intersectional? What biases are we bringing into our studies? How is our question formed? Is it correct? Is it already biased? And so on, right? Are we neglecting the emotional growth of our little men so that we are producing, people who go on to assault women? How can we raise a feminist society? Why is that door which was built so heavy in all of these buildings, and how does that injure our shoulders when you're trying to open it? There are various little things which are cruel towards marginalized communities. I don't know, I guess I've stopped sometimes, that happens. Anyway, so I started trying to pinpoint the answers, and the answers to all these remains the same. Multiple biases against women, structural issues which involve inefficient personal and professional policies and support systems, unaware, uneducated managers, and I mean education in the feminist sense, biases at home, abuse, microaggression, femininity being seen as weakness, power difference, power dynamics, childcare, period poverty, women being called crazy, not having access to people who believe them, temperature of the classroom. I'll tell you why. Access to sanitary products, access to role models, gendered language, and this is the second slide. Third slide. Oh, sorry, it's not moving. Yeah. Oh, I think I forgot to put okay, so I had basically I filled up 5 slides of bubbles like this when I was trying to write all the points of what was wrong, which is in a structural sense. And then I was like, oh my god, okay, I have to stop here. But okay, let's talk about why temperature of the office is important. Are many of you, have you felt cold in the office sometimes? So I used to feel really cold in my office when I was doing my PhD. And after trying, 3 times you tell someone to close the window and then you feel a bit bad about it. So you don't tell it. And so I would just basically slink home after a while, making sure, I'm sure that my supervisor thought I was, not being in the office most of the time. So I started looking up, about office temperature. And if you've read that amazing book called Biases Against Women by Caroline, what's the name of?
Caroline Perez.
Perez? Yeah.
Caroline Perez.
Yeah. And then I found the formula to determine standard office temperature was developed in the 1960s around the metabolic resting rate of an average man. And, basically, they overestimate female metabolic rate by as much as 35%, meaning that current offices are on average 5 degrees too cold for women. Now, then I found how does this affect maths? How does it affect women performing? Then I found there was a further study that women perform better on the maths and verbal tasks at higher temperatures. And so all of the tests, like when you take up 1 degree temperature of the room, women started performing better in maths, like they were doing these tests. And so how many of these tests are already biased, against women, and we are asking women to outperform men even in those kind of conditions, right? Which is under duress most of the time. Now, I do not need to explain how dealing with 1,000 tiny frustrations can all lead to one another to make us seem less efficient. All I mean to point out is that these 1,000 tiny frustrations are carefully designed to make women stay out because they are designed from a bygone era where women did not belong in these spaces. We're slowly breaking our women as we have forever broken men by asking them to fight their way in. However, this breaking is harsher, meaner, and uglier since we are doing it to ourselves, trying to hold open the door for other women to also come in, right? And these doors are heavy, trying not to run out of air ourselves. The path to breaking that gender imbalance in the world is not just asking women to do more. It is in realizing that the world is built to keep out women. Car airbags are designed with experiments on the average male body. So 17% more time, women die, more than 70% more than men. Coffee mugs are designed with the average palm width of a man. Heavy doors in the offices are designed taking into account male heights and male shoulders. Phone widths are designed taking into account the average palm width of a male person. Bulletproof vests are designed with the average male body in mind, again leading to more female deaths. Now we need to think about these things, research these things, and maybe build companies who try to redesign the world seen from a female perspective. And then maybe we will make sure that there are safe spaces for women. Here are the stark facts, right? Women are 51% of the world. They are the majority. They make up 83% of single parents, doing 66% of the work, producing 50% of the food, but earn only 11% of the pay and own only 1% of the land. It is clear who the working majority is here, be it emotional or physical labor. And it is time our workplaces and our cities are designed for the human resource it has rather than the patriarchal fantasy, right? As Swami Vivekananda once said, to educate your women first and then let them be. Leave them to themselves. They will tell you what reforms are necessary. Before I go, let's try for some weird, brutally honest humor. And to end this, I will perform one of my spoken word pieces called The Puppet Master. Okay. Oh, I actually forgot that. But anyways, you can read it. So this I found, I was talking about menstruation all the time, and this found by Gloria Steinem. So she said that what if men could menstruate and women could not, right? Men would brag about how long and how much. Young boys would talk about it as the envied beginning of manhood. Gifts, religious ceremonies, family dinners, and stock parties would mark the day. To prevent monthly work loss among the powerful, Congress would fund a National Institute of Dysmenorrhea. Doctors would research little about heart attacks, from which men would be hormonally protected, but everything about cramps. Sanitary supplies would be federally funded and free. Thank you, Scotland, finally. Of course, some men would still pay for the prestige of such commercial brands, right? For those light bachelor days. Statistical surveys would show that men did better in sports and won more Olympic medals during their periods. Generals, right-wing politicians, and religious fundamentalists would cite menstruation as proof that only men could serve God and country in combat. You have to give blood to take blood, right? And also rabbis, without a monthly purge of impurities, women are unclean. Come on. Male liberals and radicals, however, would insist that women are equal, just different, and that any woman could join their ranks if only she were willing to recognize the primacy of menstrual rights, or self-inflict a major wound every month. Street guys would invent slang, he's a 3-pad man, or give fives on the corner with some exchange like, man, you're looking good. Yeah, man, I'm on the rag, So, basically, medical schools would probably limit women's entry, right? They might cite faint at the sight of blood. And then there would be intellectuals who would offer the moral and logical arguments. And, in short, we would discover, as we should already know, that logic is in the eye of the logician. It's never black and white. And so this brings me to my poem called The Puppet Master. Sorry for going on so long. Hopefully you're enjoying. It's called The Puppet Master, all right? We all know The Puppet Master. I always thought of my body as a box. Tightly closed, always in place, designed by someone invisible, society, controlled by a puppet master who tightens the leashes periodically. It has happened many times. That time I fell asleep in a public train and my head and arms were coming loose and the side view of my open body would be visible to predator-like men all sitting there waiting to grab a handful because my breasts seemed to say they exist. Yes, the puppet master tightened his leash and made me jerk awake, placing my limbs back into place. I've always wondered how men found park benches relaxing. Every time I tried to rest, my body would expand to take a little more space, and the uncle next to me will manspread to feel a little more of the body fat that is my lucrative identity to him. Relaxation be damned, I tighten into a coil, checking to see my dupatta doesn't spill into a millimeter more than it needs till I leave that people must be daft for trying to relax on a park bench. Newspapers and articles I read told me false things. They made me want to run, to exercise, to try to be fit. But my body has a puppet master who cares for me in weird ways. It appeared again, agitated with his invisible leash, when I was trying to make my body run without making my breast move and without my thighs jiggling and trying to compress my bum into the flattest shape possible through the sheer power of my will. Since the open-mouthed leer of the naked workers with their loincloths and the heaviness of their gazes, waiting for the next little jiggle of my you-know-what must mean that I had listened to nonsense again. The whip cracked down, I slowed down to a walk and went home to shower off the cringe and never went back to the park again. Shouldn't media not try to lure people with false stories of being fit? It happened again on that auto rickshaw when the guy next to me was trying really hard to get some space for his body. He was trying really hard to fit his elbow under my arms, I understood. I tried to give him space. I really did. But this time, all the whip cracking by the master could not defy the laws of physics. I would have to get surgery to make my body any less. Oh yes, it happened again. In that airplane, where that guy next to me was having trouble with his man things, he needed his legs to spread wide, to give his private loads of space. I tried and tried to fit into my corner, limbs tucked into place, my arms tucked inside my contours, efficiently packed, but when that wasn't enough, maybe I should have just broken that window to throw myself out and risk being called a suicide bomber or a terrorist, since his body parts were clearly in trouble of being suffocated. But then, once or twice, I suddenly found myself in a female-only space, like in my hostel room, or that all-female train compartment. I was pleasantly surprised. My body had relaxed. It opened up, tentatively spreading out from its box, slowly, shyly at first, seeking space, seeking solace. It was afraid of the puppet master's leash, But as seconds passed and the whip did not crack, and my body was just my body, my breasts were just my breasts, my hands were not shields, and my lips not a red light district, my box lost its rigidity and slowly dispersed into space. And I ate my popcorn, sitting in my ratty shirt, my bra strap propping out, and for once not caring that it was a missile sent out to forage for prey. I was free from doing the puppet master's will. Thank you.